Resident Evil Requiem has just come out. The fever's in the air, the excitement is there, and all I want to do is watch Resident Evil movies in the lead up to my most anticipated game of 2026. And yes, that is in a year where GTA 6 is releasing. I am so hyped for this game. So let's just dive into something Resident Evil. Oh geez. It's pretty slim pickings, isn't it? But let's dive in to the first of the Paul W.S. Anderson Resident Evil movies with Resident Evil. Let's get into it.
Resident Evil.
So this movie released in 2002 and is the first of the collaborations, many collaborations, I might add, between Milla Jovovich and Paul W.S. Anderson. They are now together, but this movie set them on that collision course. Milla Jovovich as the protagonist of this entire series in Alice, who is just a very bizarre character when you dive fully into the lore of it all as the series progresses. But we start off with fairly small stakes here. What I like about these movies is they're the most cheapest form of entertainment possible. I will never defend the filmmaking craft behind a lot of these movies, but more objectively speaking, I guess, Resident Evil 1 is probably the most impressive filmmaking feat out of the entire series, I think. I think it has a very simple structure and storyline that makes it a decently fun watch and is the most easiest of the whole franchise to recommend, and is definitely one of the better Resident Evil movies that are still going. That's very slim pickings because there are fuck all good movies that have adapted Resident Evil, and I think the main problem with all of that is, look, I will never defend the stories for the Resident Evil games. Some are decent enough, they're solid to pull the game along. I don't mind some of the narratives. I think Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil Village were all interesting stories that I think are very entertaining for what they deliver on. But let's be honest, we do not come to the Resident Evil franchise for their gripping narratives. They're more known for just phenomenal survival horror gameplay mixed with an action twist, and that's why we love the games. They're done at just such a supremely high level. So when you're adapting a video game series that doesn't have the strongest of storylines and you're trying to take things from that while doing your own thing, there is not much to draw from in a movie sense, and it makes for just a very tough experience to get through a lot of these movies. I think the common problem all throughout it, and is definitely prevalent in the first one, is there are severe pacing problems. As I said, it has a very simple narrative. Alice wakes up after a virus has been let loose. She doesn't know who she is, where she is, what's going on. She's in a mansion, and as you go through the movie, her memory starts unlocking things and she learns more and more, hence teaching the audience a few things. It's the most simple of narrative devices, but I do think it actually works here and sets up some decent enough reveals, even though your connection to a lot of these characters isn't the greatest. But what these movies absolutely deliver on is just some badass action and some great, almost iconic horror scenes. I mean, the laser hallway scene is just amazing. It was well crafted, well done. The way that it builds tension and its payoff right at the end is both gory and satisfying, even if the visual effects behind some of these decisions haven't quite aged the best, but that's okay because it sets up an entertaining scene. I think Milla Jovovich as Alice is pretty great. She is a solid action hero throughout all of these movies, and it is just peak being in that era of the mid-2000s where you were getting a lot of these female-led action movies with a somewhat fantasy fictional setting, like Resident Evil, like Underworld, or like Tomb Raider. They're all there, but I think Alice is actually the strongest of them all. I just think she is willing to commit to a lot of just brilliant action set pieces. She delivers on the physicality of the roles that she's in, and I think she's committed enough, even though her dramatic chops aren't really the best throughout the entire series. I think Resident Evil suffers from having a really good beginning, a very well-made introduction, and having a really interesting cliffhanger that is a payoff for fans of the series and you see come to light in the second film. But a lot of the middle of this movie is just such empty calories and is so forgettable. I always find myself getting really bored throughout a lot of the film's runtime and get quite exhausted by it. It almost feels like a background movie at points. And I think that's where the problems really stem from, because once again, that problem exists throughout pretty much all of the movies in this series. The action as well is well conceived, has great ideas, and I do think has great choreography, but it is edited so poorly. This is jump cut city. Like, there is just cutting after cutting after cutting, and you do not know what's going on. There's shaky cam all throughout it. It's such a pain in the ass trying to watch some of these scenes and know where's the character, what's going on, where's the tension. There's nothing. It's just a mess thrown on the screen, and that's really annoying because you can tell that some of these once again, they're well conceived. And then there's how this story ties to just the lore and being just a part of just fan service and something that fans of this series want to see. I think they have an interesting jumble of elements of the games. You know, we're in the Spencer Mansion. We're learning a little bit of lore about how the virus started, and then Alice's connection to the wider lore of Resident Evil. The games never really tie into the movies at all, but it is interesting just having these nice little fan servicey moments throughout this movie. The introduction to the first zombie in this movie is pretty iconic, and it's something that is a staple of the Resident Evil series. The horror here does leave a lot to be desired, and that is a shame because the earlier Resident Evil games really tied a lot into claustrophobic horror, being low on resources, but still having a lot to get through. And in the case of a Resident Evil 2 or 3, a massive invincible enemy just chasing you throughout most of the game, which is just downright terrifying. None of that really rears its head here, but you do get a lot of the iconic Resident Evil creatures here, and that is fun to see on screen, even though, once again, they're represented sort of poorly with some really bad visual effects. The dogs and the lickers, for example, do not look that great at all, and even for 2002, where the technology hasn't advanced like it has now, it still was better than this. So there's really no excuses here. It is pretty poor. Overall, I think Resident Evil is a fine movie. It's one that I've rewatched multiple times now, and I have a 4K of. So I obviously like it to some extent. I'd be lying if I said I didn't like it. But out of the movies that I watch regularly or rewatch a lot, it's not my favorite. It is a bit tiresome to get through, but you know, after a year passes, I'm always like, well, let's dive into this series again because I want to. And once again, with the new game coming out, I just wanted to get my fix some way, and to have that through the movie was fine enough. It's an easy popcorn flick to watch, but don't expect the most definitive tier level of an adaptation that is going to blow your mind. And I mean, that's if you haven't even seen this movie. A lot of you probably have, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about it in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.